got 10:30. We can get started. Thank you all for coming today. I think everybody knows me. I'm Michael Byrd. Happy to be here on campus. I don't know if I'm happy to be in this room doing this right now, but I'm glad to see everybody this morning. We're going to do just a QEP Atlas update, and we want this to be fairly interactive as far as getting feedback on how some things are going. Robbie is going to be jotting down items from our conversation today. We want you to be open and honest about how things are going. We are pleased with some things, and there's some things we know we've got to do things a little bit differently on. So first, let's talk a little bit about college life. That course that we taught this last fall. This is one statistic compared to last year that showed some pretty great improvement. This past fall, 93.5% of our students were enrolled in the college life section that were taught by their academic advisor. That's compared to the previous year was only at 80%. So that's a really good improvement. And what that's doing, that's telling us that our advisees are getting in the right section of the class, which is helping them start that relationship with their academic advisor. And so we're really pleased with this. And then Robbie, we looked at the other, 6.5% that weren't in the right section, and most of them are easily explainable. There was a late major change. I know some of them in health sciences, they were in one of Tiffany's sections instead of with their assigned advisor. So we're doing really, really well on this. So that goes right back to y'all. Great job getting folks in the right sections as we're making schedules. That was really good. But what we really want to discuss this morning about college life is, what was your experience? How do you feel like it went? We piloted this, the new setup course design of college life, last spring. And then phase 2 of the pilot was in the fall. So maybe if everybody's got somebody next to them, let's kind of do a think, pair, share first if we can. Can you turn to someone next to you and discuss these questions? How did college life go? What went well? What things we need to stop doing or change? What's our next step with college life? Okay, and then we'll come back together and discuss the full group. That's your session. Go.
And I went in Martin, you brought chairs. Opposite. But I didn't think about that. About the labels. So they have the same thing as ours is really important to track. So they were really, and Mark, he ran I went out for 15 minutes early, but I didn't know. But now, George, they were about more people. And I don't want yeah, and I told her, I said, oh, Mom, need to meet with you. And a lot of times, of course, I was showing her. So she was saying, okay, this is how you do it, you know. It is doable, you just have to, it's different.
So you got 30 more seconds to wrap up those little discussions.
It's got good
All right, if we come back together, let's start here. What should we continue doing with college life? What's going well? And we may naturally, organically slide into some other topics that are related. That's fine. But let's start with that question. You might want to kick us off. Yeah.
I thought it was really good. I liked it. I thought that it would be nice if it was deployed to us where we could decide if it needed to be in sequential order and like when we unlock the modules, because that caused some confusion between teacher to teacher, I think.
Yeah.
And just let us make that decision. But otherwise, I love like the content was. I thought the content was. I don't know how everybody else feels. The content was great. It was so organized. Like my students never complained about any of it. Now the sequential order was getting to it. Which
Tell me, what do you mean by sequential order?
I don't know if that's something y'all are trying to teach them about going through modules in sequential order, but like even if I open a module, okay, if they have not clicked on every link in the sequential order that it's in the module before, it will not, even if it's open, it will not open the next one. Well, let's say they were sick, they had COVID, they just are not gonna, they'll go back and do that later. Then I was, you know what I'm saying? It was just hard.
And I'll own that one.
In the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
So I would go back and have to,
but it's one of those things that looks really good on paper.
It does. And maybe we're
But
trying to
some
teach them
people,
that, and that's, I understand that too.
I mean, but some people already knew some of this stuff, right? So they're like, well, I can read through that pretty fast, but having to
Click through everything.
but that's
because
a
I
on
thought,
paper thing
wow,
versus
I don't know what you're talking about. And then I think maybe Andrew told me, or somebody said, oh, they're not doing blah, blah, blah about the sequential, and I was like.
Yeah, but we had to figure that, because you and I don't use sequential, so we didn't know what was going on.
It was kind of set up like savings class though.
But no, but I'm nothing against the course, I'm telling you, I was very happy.
That
Great.
was definitely the feedback I got from the students.
And that is
They did
great
not like
feedback.
that.
Saban and I had a conversation about that early, mid-semester, and we talked about how that technical component would be maybe not the best way to do it in the future. So we've already looked at maybe making that change. So that's great feedback. Yeah, Justin.
So it did not start at the beginning of the semester, right?
It started 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. Yeah.
Why was it?
Some people had to take the orientation class.
Okay.
The ones that weren't able to take orientation over the summer, we made a mini term for them to take that first.
I knew there was a reason, I just couldn't remember why.
Yeah, that was it.
I got a lot of complaints from instructors because of that. Some of mine in the past would like to do it, the first week of school. And in a way, I can see why it's good, because a lot of the things that they're going over are things that these students need to know now and not later in the semester.
And that's something I thought about, what's our next step specifically for your division? Is your division categorically different? Do you need to have a different blueprint for the CTE students?
I had a lot of comments about that start date.
And that fits into that.
They can do it together.
So maybe that's something we do this semester, is we meet with y'all's instructors and see what we can do to make it better for y'all's divisions in particular.
But students were very confused about it not being available. I had lots and lots of calls about that.
Yeah.
And we did it just so that they could do the orientation that first 2 weeks again,
Which
for students.
I just looked up the term and said, this doesn't start till, but that's all I could tell them.
And I agree, because when you think about all the online classes starting, some of our students don't even realize that the online start a week later than the face-to-face, so,
And then short term too.
And then short term too, and then,
Spring break short term too.
Anyone else, things we should continue doing in the class? All right, let's move forward then. What might need to change? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to do differently, Coach?
I think what we talked about yesterday. We were talking
Once
about
you-
that. So, when, at the end, they've got to make a plan, right, of their whole semester plan. And what I mentioned to Michael yesterday was, a lot of times, one, they're gonna change their mind. So it may not even be what they need. But it's a little much to ask them as a freshman to think that far in advance. For me as an advisor, if they would just look at the next semester and make that plan, so that when we come in and talk about advising during advising week, they've got kind of an idea of what they need, so we're already on a better footing when they start. So I thought it would have been more realistic to not do the whole Northeast plan, but just to do the next semester.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, and I think she's absolutely right. I think because mine, are mostly engineering, they have kind of the whatever.
Right.
So we could maybe do that on instructor basis. Like if I wanted to say, I really want y'all to look at 4 semesters, but I don't know that that's right for most
Psychology,
students.
yeah.
Right.
So I didn't run
Right.
into that, but
Yeah.
now that she says that,
Well, I mean, even psychology, students either absolutely that's what they're doing, or they got no idea.
Yeah.
Right? There's
That
never,
just
there's
sounds
never
what
like,
they
oh,
mean.
maybe. It's always yes or but they are general studies, and so
but to
they don't
concentrate
really know
on
where
just
they're
the next
going
semester
either
is
way.
smart, yeah,
Right.
little baby steps,
Yeah,
right?
baby
I
steps.
think that may be wise.
Yeah. I
And
think
you,
that's-
what Michael had mentioned was having an option, like you are required to do this semesters, but for bonus or for, depending on your advisor, here's how you do a full plan. I thought that was a really good compromise
Yeah.
with that.
I think so too. I didn't think about that.
But for your engineering majors, it's almost
They need
imperative
to
that
know-
they do
Yeah.
more.
Anything like that,
They
very
need to know
specific.
that there is a sequential order,
Mhm.
if they start behind, they need
This
to know
will be
that
our-
now, and it is good. But I can see where that is not helpful
Yeah.
for certain
Right.
students.
That's a great point. Anybody else? Anything that needs to be different or changed?
So going back to that sequential order.
Yeah.
When a student either finds out from somebody else or figures it out for themselves that this is strictly a pass or fail course, they look at some things like, that's a little bit more, this week's assignment's more than I really wanna do, or maybe it's midterm week or something. I don't know, for whatever reason, they're like, I'm just gonna skip this week. But
Okay.
they can't, right, with this, is that right?
You're right, yeah, they would be required to submit every assignment
Right.
anyways.
So,
And that's the benefit to the sequential order, is to make sure that they do everything, you know.
okay. So I think I had a guy that begged me to get, it was like Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
He was like, I just now realized you cut me out of this. He was like, I was like, well, you gotta go all the way back there.
Yeah.
But he did.
Well, on that
And some
note,
students also realize I only have to make 60%, so they only do the bare minimum.
You're gonna have.
Well, and that was the question I believe I got asked the most about college life is, what is passing? And I know we keep saying that 60 or 70% or whatever it may be. What is that though? I mean, is that just completing the assignment or completing the, and so I think we get a little bit more clarification on that one.
well, backing up even further, should the course be complete and complete, or should it be, or pass fail, or should it be a letter grade?
It could potentially be a letter grade and be a booster for their GPA, for the ones who complete it. Now, there will always be those who just don't do the work.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that would be a fairly easy change.
Well, you go through a whole catalog change.
Yeah,
That's
but-
what I was thinking.
Graduation requirements.
Because we've discussed that before
Yeah.
about why it's pass
I mean, we
fail.
can do it, but
Yeah.
we can't just say.
I know.
Right, yeah, there's a process.
I think though, Jason, is it not, your programs can't have that extra?
Yeah, an extra hour was a big problem with
So if they have
Fancy's
a-
office, so,
Yeah.
or music too.
Yeah, it can be,
It's, I think giving a letter grade causes it not to be the
called-
check
And
box.
financial
I
aid
see,
too.
Yeah, the only problem we had, and we had discussed this, coming from counseling, I knew the ins and outs of the LLS classes that we called booster classes, right? And so I knew what was required and not. What was required with the college life course was a lot more than some of these that you are getting, an hour
Or even
credit
the ones
for.
that you get
Or
for
even
3
the
hours.
3 hour, honestly. The human development class was a lot less than the work you had to do for this class. Now, this class is obviously much more beneficial, but when we're looking at, I could get an A for doing this, and I just get a pass-fail for this.
But those aren't required for graduation.
Yeah,
No, they're
So that's the
not.
problem with
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
hours.
and
The
so-
check mark for the
Right.
graduation is the problem with this.
And we have beefed up those
Right.
other
Yeah, and they
classes
have
last
been.
year, yeah. But I see your point there.
But there was a reason, like the financial literacy was put into college life for reason, right?
There's a SACS requirement that
Yeah.
we have, instruction given about
Yes.
financial literacy.
There is some reasons why we put certain
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the content that's in there is,
factual.
we gotta have it.
so is there anything in there that maybe could be a bonus or could be an optional assignment versus the ones that are absolutely required for SACS?
Oh, sure, yeah, we could definitely be flexible on some of that.
Cause that was the other thing in the feedback that I got on the course at the end of the semester was that it was a lot of work.
Okay.
And some of them said, you know, I could have went through and done this in 2 weeks if, you know, cause you have those students who are really those type A, they're gonna go in, they're gonna get it done, they're gonna get it out of the way so they can focus on their others. And that was their issue with the prerequisite was they couldn't go through and plan. They wanted to go through and be able to see, okay, I'm gonna need to set aside this much time for that assignment. And
Gotcha.
like I said, that's not your average student, but those above average students get really upset when their hands are tied at that.
But opening it up would benefit all the students.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe for the ones that are required for sites, you have to do those quizzes before you move on. Maybe not the whole module, but the quiz
To take a
has to
closer
be
look at which
taken.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just
That's a
an
good
idea.
thought. Okay. Anyone else? Any thoughts about things that should change or be different moving forward? What our next steps in the class might be. At the end of the day, we want to benefit the student. So if there's anything about it that's not benefiting the student,
So if you have one that fails the college life, is there one being offered
Yes.
this term but that wouldn't be with their advisors, with you?
it's with, I'm not teaching it this semester. It's someone in the Success Center. I think maybe Dr. Shelton teaching it, but someone down there is teaching it. The makeup section, I guess we call it.
Do we sign them up for that? See if we see that letter greater than F, or does it automatically get done?
Last semester, or last spring, Tabitha, Michelle's office, ran a process to identify who needed to be put in it. It should not fall on the advisor. So, as per my understanding.
If you see it, you might need to go ahead and do it, but there is a process that they're supposed to check
Yeah.
those.
Anything else for college life? Really good discussion. These are good notes we can take back and discuss.
And I know I had 2 or 3 that, of course, I didn't teach college life this semester, but my buddy said this, my buddy said that, and they didn't even realize they were in the course till literally didn't realize they were in the course till Thanksgiving, like you say. And of course, they just have to start all over in the spring. But somehow we've got to get our advisors to, stress, you're in this college life course,
Well, can an automatic announcement be set up in the class so that it goes out like the first day to say, hey, this class starts today?
I was just thinking, has Michelle's section on Civitas, has that happened yet?
No, that's next. And that's what I thought, maybe that is actually where we're gonna get them, because they're not, the problem I had one student who never responded to anything. And it was, I sent an email message, like a specific email, a Canvas message, an announcement, gave them zeros. So there's every avenue in Canvas that could have been met. But if they had gotten that message on their cell phone, that text message that said, hey, look at Canvas, they would have seen it then.
Well, I know Dr. Harris and us were talking one time, and he said, I've gone in and put all zeros in everything that's passed to indicate to them, hey, contact me, and some of them still did not.
Right.
Either, so.
And a lot of times that does get them.
And that was, a great strength of having an in-person section of college life, as we had a few years ago. Scheduling's a nightmare for that, getting you in the right section with your advisor, but they knew they had to show up for a class.
What about the text messaging that you can do from Canvas, the regroup?
They've got to sign up for that though.
Yeah, they do have
They
to
gotta
sign
opt
up
in.
for it, but if they're opted in for it, you could send them a text message that way.
That would be something we could look into, the timing and who should send out a prompt to remind people that college life is starting.
I'm on a committee, I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on that. Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
We're working on that.
Yeah.
That would be a great,
Yeah.
It's just not ready yet.
yeah. Forgot y'all were working on that, that's good.
I know I'm a little out of sync, but I thought that was great, that send a message to let them know that college life, cause I was like, hey, look, have y'all looked at
Yeah.
that? Have y'all done,
Yeah.
have y'all looked at this? Have y'all done, it's like, oh, that's it, no, you need to look in that
It's
college
got a
life.
different start date.
It's the attitude behind it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just a pass fail, like, I'll go in and do that later, it'll be fine, and they don't
But I told
realize.
myself, I think you have some deadlines.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know, but I said, I think you have some deadlines.
Well-
You need to go in and start doing that now.
The previous college life course was just every instructor could set their deadlines at any time, so everything was different that year before, up until this point. I'm pretty sure,
Yes.
y'all correct me if I'm wrong. So, and whether we believe it or not, our students talk to the ones that's had it before, and they say, oh, you can just do that, it's just whatever, by the end of the semester, as long as you've got it done, so.
Some of these things will likely improve just with time.
Mhm.
There's some things we need to change.
I ended up doing that, and I'm probably telling on myself, but I went in and told my students, as long as you have everything done by the end, I made them do check-ins weekly where they had to send me a message or it was related to whatever was in that module.
Yeah.
But I left it open, went back and changed some stuff just because a lot of them were saying, like, I've got this class and this class, and so I left it open. But they had to have so much done by midterm and then so much done, so I still had to cut a student out,
Yeah.
but
Gives them a leg
that
to
did
help.
help.
Okay. Very good. Well, if you have any other thoughts, feel free anytime to let me or Robbie know. If a thought just comes to you, shoot me an email, and we have a running list of things to look at in the class. So, second part, things I wanted us to look at were with pathways, everybody's favorite topic these days. But we're gonna look at some things that how things are going and what are the next steps with pathways. Okay. So, what wasn't working, what now isn't working as well. So we went over this before, but we had uneven advising loads, right? And in an effort to help address that, pathways was pitched. There were also misunderstandings about the general studies degree. But now, since we went to pathways, we've lost specificity, that content area expertise that advisors have for a given area, and that's frustrating. We're hearing, and I believe it. Yeah, I get it. For both advisors and advisees, in an attempt to fix what wasn't working, new problems have been created. So as I've thought about this, I thought about a pendulum, right? We were on one side of the spectrum. We swung it. We let it swing too far. We made an overcorrection, and now we've got a whole other slew of problems we're looking at. Does that sound right? Is that where we're sitting? Okay. So we've talked about this with the administration. We tried to go to bat as best we can from the QEP, and there's been a few things that have been approved that we're going to be working on moving forward. First, advisors need to have more input as to what pathway you are advising in. I know some of you are misaligned a little bit, right? Some of you may be in a pathway that's not where you're strongest at, and we want to help with that. Second, pathways can be broken down into smaller buckets within each grouping. For example, the STEM pathway is ginormous. And in one day, you might meet with a chemistry major, a math major, a biology major, a computer science major, and you might, well, all that, you may not hit anybody that's from your field of expertise. So smaller buckets underneath each pathway. And advisors need to have a strong voice when we're identifying those pathways. It doesn't just need to come from the top down, but give a voice to everyone that's going to be actually doing the advising. Does all that sound about right? Any thoughts about that? Anybody want to give an amen or?
The only thing I'd add is we need to talk to our advisees too. We never did
Yes.
that from the beginning. We never talked to any student and asked them what's going on.
We look at the number of stakeholders, they're our biggest group. You're absolutely right. Anybody else, any thoughts about any of
It's
this?
just made a huge difference to me because I'm at half the advisees and it's a world of difference and I get to spend time with them. So I get afraid that it's gonna swing the other way and I'm gonna be back at 55, 60.
Yeah.
And
We don't wanna
it's
see
unmanageable, for me it's unmanageable, like it was unmanageable. And
Yeah.
this was, like for me, I think I'm the only one that had a good experience.
I think you're there are some that were benefited.
And so I don't want to say this, I'm not gonna mess up for anybody else if we need to go back, but I'm just saying, I just want it to be clear that that difference between the numbers is life-changing for me.
Yeah.
And part of this is, and we, Chassie, they've got a solution in place, we're gonna start seeing it. Always having an accurate list of advisees. That was something that we should have started with before we talked about anything else. But hopefully we've got that figured out. If not, we need to continue making sure that that gets fixed first, because as long as we have an accurate list of advisees and can even those out so we don't have people with 70, 80, 90, we can do all of this. But if we got everybody with 150 advisees because we've got people from 5 years ago on there and we don't really know who we're advising, none of this is ever gonna really change in my opinion. So that's another thing, and hopefully that's gonna be fixed. But my biggest thing to everybody in this room is if that's not fixed and our lists are not accurate every single semester, we need to talk about that more and more. And that doesn't just need to get pushed under the rug and go, oh, well, that's Northeast, that's what we always do. We need to keep complaining about that to make sure that always gets updated and is accurate.
But Helen, you probably had legitimately
Was working
55.
with 50,
Yeah.
yeah.
She did.
And I could talk on the phone maybe with 5, like some of them were online only, those were a little bit easier.
Mhm.
It was awful.
Mhm.
And last semester was the dream come true. Like, that's my fear about just the load. And I mean, I was able to spend time with people. Like, it was great.
And my load was down too, but I didn't, like, my engineering advisees disappeared somewhere. They went, I don't know who got them. I'm sorry, whoever did. But I had
That's a
like,
good point.
I was all over the place. And so for me,
That
it was much
here.
harder.
It was upsetting for mine. They were like, why do I
Yeah.
have this advisor? You were my advisor last year.
Yeah.
And that upset them.
Yeah.
I still had students
Understandable.
coming back to me anyway.
Yeah, no, I had that too. I forgot about that.
And I do
Yeah.
think, you know, people above Michael and I, let's say that, took this and said, oh, we're gonna put 6 people in business. Well, there's an English instructor, there's a history instructor, you know, and students then would come to me and say, well, I want somebody that's in business or accounting. I don't want an English instructor. So I think that point about advisors having a stronger voice of what you are good at and what you can advise, that's what we need to take into place to begin with. Because if you're not comfortable with it.
Is there a way that we can move the discipline out of the pathway and put it in another one? Or put it where it's grouped better?
Tell me what you mean. Give me an example.
Well,
maybe.
athletic training and exercise science and physical education, kinesiology.
It's in the education.
Coaching,
all that's
all of that. Every one of them are dispersed in.
Instead of just, they're in the education pathway.
Yeah.
And pre-health.
Yeah, but like kinesiology shouldn't be.
Exactly.
Athletic training's in hospitality or something.
No,
I
it's in STEM.
It's in STEM.
had 3 come to me.
Okay, so you probably had some of the kids that should have been coming to me, which is, they put me with y'all because of recreation. But we don't usually have like 2 or 3 recreational kids. It's mostly teaching, coaching, kinesiology, exercise science. And then we get a couple recreational, and then sometimes we get a few dietetics. I literally saw none of those students because none of them is in my pathway because I'm with sociology and psychology.
I think
Hospitality and,
Human services.
Yes.
culinary was the one for me that's just weird.
Well, I think one thing that could fix some of it is a little legwork on our part up front is if we can develop a plan where we say, okay, if you're a psychology major, and I mean, again, we've done this already, but if you go to Ole Miss, here's what you need to do. If you go to Mississippi State, here's what you need to do. If you go wherever, here's what you need for psychology. And then we have that uploaded.
A template.
So that anybody who got anybody can go to our little website where we've got the different pathways and click on psychology Mississippi State, and they say, you know, I don't do psychology, but I do this, it's in my pathway, this is what Mississippi State's required, let's go by it. You know,
Which what we've been saying was we have the MAT tool.
Right.
The MAT tool is great, but it's not.
It's
I don't trust it 100%.
Well, for example,
I found
well,
some
and there's
examples where I
things
don't
that
trust
it just depends. Like we know with Mississippi State, there's some things that do count, even though the MAC tool doesn't say it, they will count it, but you gotta make sure that you've got X, Y, Z. So there's little things like, again, advisors having more input, but if we can make those templates and have those available for everybody, it does make life a lot easier. It's hard to advise things you don't know, but it can be done. In counseling, I advised, back when we used to do that 100 years ago, I advised every major, because all I had to do was get the catalog. It was simpler times. But I could get the catalog out and I could look at what was required for that and say, okay, here's this. Now you do need to go see your real advisor and have them check off on it, but I know exactly what you need, roundabouts. So if we have that, that solves some of the issues.
Yeah, I think that's very doable. And then to go back to this question over here, I think the answer to that could be yes, probably, maybe. But what we've been told, like Robbie said, from above our heads, what we were able to do is we can create some smaller groupings within the pathways. And what it'll look like on their major officially, it would say, for example, STEM biology, if that was one of the groupings. General studies. Yeah, general studies, STEM biology. I use biology just because that's what my degree's in. But as far as moving something from one pathway to another, we can look at that too. That might be a little more complicated, but probably, maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's really hard to get a student in to one advisor's office, much less two. So like if I got them in my office, but they were a sociology major and they had all these questions about the Tupelo campus, etc., I would then have to either walk them over to Ms. Stevens' office or give them her, and then sometimes we would lose them because they wouldn't follow up with Ms. Stevens. And then I didn't know if Ms. Stevens had them and taking care of them, or if I needed to take care of them, because it was like, I'm your primary, but she's your secondary. It got really... And
is that what's best for the student?
We're losing the students because they're so confused. Like, I was like, I don't know why you're my advisor because you teach nutrition, but I'm a sociology major. You know what I mean? So it was like very confusing for the students.
But I do think that drop down, if they allow us to do that third link, is going to alleviate a lot of those. And that, for instance, that you are back to your group. You know, I think we've got to pull all those things together.
So on that note, let's actually do a little activity together. Got a QR code here. This is going to link to a Google form. And what it is, you'll see on here, when you open it up, you'll indicate what pathway, to which pathway do you belong. And then if you ran the zoo, how would you subdivide that pathway? Think, you know, it can't be a cajillion subdivisions, but if you were to put in 3 or 4 or 5 subdivisions under each pathway for your pathway, what would it look like to you? And we want to start collecting some data in this way. And we're also going to be meeting with the advising committee that's comprised of faculty to get a better glimpse of this. So take a second, fill that out. That's okay.
All right, I'm already confused.
Okay, what?
All right, so I'm in hospitality and human services. And then it says what subgroups beneath this general pathway. I don't know what, I mean.
What do you think should be there?
Yeah.
Not what's already there.
Yeah, what should be the subgroups underneath that? Like, you're in that pathway, right?
Yes.
So what were the main areas you advised this year? If you could put those in smaller buckets, what would those buckets be labeled as? Psychology, sociology, whatever else is in there.
I'm going to the MAT transfer tool to figure it out.
Yes, if you want to go to the MAT tool to get you an idea of what all, quote unquote, officially is in that pathway.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, the MAT tool would be the best place to look at for that if you want to reference it real quick.
Michael, is there any talk about modeling the way that we're doing it in health science now? Where they had a central advisor and they have break off?
We are going to meet with other colleges in the state.
So we're still looking at that phase?
We're still in the exploration phase of that.
I just know it's made such a difference.
I'm sure, yeah. We can have a,
It's much more organized, they know where to go if they can't get to their advisor.
I think Health Sciences right now is a great model for a hybrid of professional and faculty advising.
Every person in the degree works that I see in every plan, so that we can have some kind of data, but I don't know.
Then I think you should be social media.
I think that would help so much, at least with
Yes.
if we just had some stuff. Just policy.
In our, pathway, we have
So how many STEM diagnoses? How many STEM majors do you? I know we have about 500 real science and nursing. Is it similar to about the same
STEM
for
is just,
STEM?
it can be huge. I mean,
Yeah.
That's what I said.
it depends on how specific you want to get. I mean, because you could do, we could get back to where we were, I guess, and we don't want to get that specific, because then the loads can get so huge, but, or so small.
What do you say? I just did vegetation. She just does engineering, but she has 50, I have 8. I take some of the engineering, then I can just talk to her. I'm just that one person. But I'm still having my people, my one, because mine's small, obviously.
What that could look like in ours, like a pre-professional bucket, and you're still, it's a smaller group, but you know a small group that you can go to. There's different ways you could do it.
Like with
Yeah, I think
science,
that's what we're going
the
towards.
radiology can still go on this before it's still related, and we're able to do that.
The big problem is when they start assigning the advisor.
Because it's an automatic process.
And it just goes to the next person from admission.
and that's what Chad's doing.
You know, it'd be wonderful if you could take her list and say, now you're mine, but they automatically, and just you change the pathways, and somebody can.
Well, and that's where you can literally have two people for that.
Not currently, anyways.
That would make sense. I mean, you take the few that have 100 and disperse just those, that way the other students aren't suffering. Suffering, lose time.
You know what I'm saying?
I think it's a good point.
That's why
Everybody had a chance to fill that out?
I mean, it takes her. I did.
Okay. Anybody else need some more time? You're still working on it? Okay, yeah, take another minute.
I think us having a very, we're talking about a very specific place where we go through everything. You know, some of it's like the website. It's the website.
Yeah,
Right.
central location.
Literally having
There's been a lot of new
tab.
things.
Literally having a tab that says advice.
Yes.
Right. I mean, for us, we used to go to advisory basics. Right. And people are true, but for us, it's advisories about their orders. Go to that have others.
Most of them don't know who they're about.
At least in mine.
We don't do it like
Right.
every day. There's space
But I'll
between,
put
so
that-
every
I'll
time.
email
you
that
say,
to you.
And that's
what is
fine,
it?
where that is really
I mean, what's
easy.
your
Like, they don't know where to go.
go.
So if they clicked on it and said, what is my, what
You know,
is
if it
my,
has
who
true.
is my advisor? Looking at that would be a video that says, welcome to the group.
Yes.
When you get in here, this will show you who your advisor is,
Yes.
where they're located, and what classes you have.
Yeah.
Like an advising for dummies Canvas course for us, like every semester, just to remind you.
Which we're gonna have the advisory resource course,
Yeah.
which we could harness more, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we used to have like a cheat sheet, I called it, that on one side was all the classes you gotta have to get into one class, or your ACT scores, and the other side was who to contact.
Yeah.
And we've got the advising handbook.
Yeah.
There's some one-page appendices in there, but it's big, and we need to make it more digestible.
Well, but if you clicked on that and it was there,
Yeah.
that would be easier to access it there too. You know, a central location is helpful, but like you said, we have
Great.
a lot.
Well, thank y'all for filling that out. This is gonna help us get started on this process, and as we move forward, we wanna keep hearing from y'all, and so we can get this right. As far as me and Robbie with the QEP, what we're gonna be doing this semester, kind of our agenda. We're gonna be traveling to and meeting with other colleges in our area to see how are they doing advising, how are they making pathways work. Because there's lots of community colleges in the state that are using pathways, it seems effectively. So what are they doing and how can we change to do better ourselves? Second, we're going to be meeting with the advising committee specifically about these subgroups to get these nailed down. We want to make sure the timing is right on that, because similar to the problem we had last summer where you had to crosswalk majors, old majors to new majors, if we make a change, we're going to have the same issue we're going to deal with. People in the STEM pathway right now, they're going to be funneled down into one of those subgroups. So we'll have to get that done before summer. And then continue to develop new advisory training materials, and with that, like Emily brought up and Claire, the different resources we can make available to make advising easier and more digestible for students and for advisors themselves. So that's on our agenda. But does anybody have any other thoughts or things you'd like for us to be thinking about, working on as we look at pushing advising forward?
Has the students been surveyed about what their perception was of the advisee changes? Have we gotten feedback from them?
We have done the advising questionnaire that you all got. There's a parallel one for the students, but we didn't add a question specifically about pathways on there and that change. We certainly could do a survey effort on that. Many of them won't know any different, so we'll have to put an asterisk by it for that
And
purpose,
actually, they were complimentary, if I'm remembering correctly, about the advising process here. So I mean,
most of the data over last year, we saw improvement for their experience with advising generally. So,
and of course, you know, that may be the brand new students that are taking the survey that's never had anything different. You know,
we don't have much longitudinal data compared to yet. So
the only frustration that I heard from students was when their advisor changed and they didn't know who the new one was. It wasn't new students, it was the ones who had their advisor and then they lost that advisor.
In all honesty, in the library, we actually ended up seeing more advisees because they could never get in contact with their actual advisor. So it was every day. I can't find my advisor, so somebody told me to come to the library. So we saw a lot more than we had in the past.
Well, and I've gotten several nursing people that obviously didn't pass or whatever, and so now they're going to business, you know, let's say that. And they come to me, but then next semester they're Sally Boland, you know, so they have a hard time. Then some will just come back to me because I was the first person of contact with them, you know. So I see that our students are confused. And, you know, we just got to make ourselves available as advisors too, that they don't have to come to the library just for that backup, you know, that you're there, but, you know, we do want them to have the point of contact with their advisors.
And I think something else that because we're focusing on the point of contact and giving them a good experience semester by semester, and this is kind of the big picture side of it. We've got to figure out how we're going to track these students from day one on this campus to the time that they leave. And I know the library does this, and they're doing a really good job of knowing what they're taking each semester they're here and why they're taking it, and that they've left us and they've left us successfully, or if they haven't left us successfully, following that up and figuring out why. How we do that, I don't know, and I know that's a very complex thing. And I don't even necessarily think that that's something for everybody in this room, but that's the goal we've got to get to, is figuring out what these students are doing, why they're doing it, and where they're at. Because how many students have we lost just because maybe they thought they had graduated or they didn't think they could graduate? And I think that's something that we need to think about bigger picture wise, but there's some things that have got to be implemented to do that.
I do think, you know, I heard of a couple of instances where a new advisor was advising a student and did catch something, you know, like this person only likes one more hour if they'll complete this semester. So it's not all been a bad thing in that other eyes have been on a particular student's coursework that way.
Anyone else? Any thoughts, anything you want to share? Anything you want to ask? All right, well, thank y'all very, very much for coming. We're right at time, so appreciate it.
It's not-